Entitlement in a relationship doesn't start with someone demanding something. It starts with something that was freely given. This is marriage wisdom for wives who want a long marriage, and I am Donna. And most people don't realize that when it's happening, because in the beginning, you're not thinking about pressure. You're not thinking about expectations. You're not thinking about what this is going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You're just doing something because you want to, because you care, because it feels natural. And a lot of times it starts with something small. It could be something like cooking, making sure things are handled, showing up in a certain way every day. And in the beginning, it doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like love. But here's where the shift happens. And it doesn't happen loud. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly. Because the more you do something without saying anything, the more it becomes part of the relationship. It becomes part of the rhythm. It becomes the normal. And once something becomes normal, people stop questioning it. Not because they're trying to take advantage, but because it's always been there. And that's where something that started as love can quietly turn into expectation. And when something becomes expected without understanding, it starts to feel different. Because now it's no longer, I'm doing this because I want to. It starts to feel like I have to keep doing this. It could look like cooking every day, handling certain responsibilities, always being the one to adjust, always being the one to make things smooth. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing those things. The problem is when it's not understood. Because when something isn't understood and it just continues, it can start to feel heavy. And a lot of women don't say anything when that shift happens because they don't want to cause a problem. They don't want to make a big deal. So they keep going. But inside, they feel the difference. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think entitlement comes from someone demanding something. But a lot of times, it comes from something that was never clearly understood in the first place. Not everything you start out of love is meant to become a permanent expectation. And this doesn't mean you stop doing things out of love. It means you stay aware. You stay intentional. You pay attention to what is sustainable and what is not. Because when you're intentional, you don't just give. You understand what you're giving. You understand what it means over time. And you understand how it can be received. And let me slow that down for a second, because this is where a lot of people miss it. Sometimes we don't realize we're creating a pattern. We think we're just doing something small, something simple. something that doesn't really matter like that. But over time, those small things add up. And when they add up, they don't just stay small. They become part of the relationship. And once something becomes part of the relationship, it carries weight, even if nobody ever said anything about it. And that's the part people don't talk about enough, because nobody sits down in the beginning and says, hey, is this something we're going to do forever? It just happens. And then one day you realize this thing you've been doing, you've been carrying it for a long time, and now it feels different. Not because the relationship is bad, but because something shifted. And if you don't catch that shift, it keeps going. And the longer it goes, the harder it is to talk about. Because once something becomes expected, it changes the feeling behind it. And when the feeling changes, that's when pressure starts. And if pressure isn't addressed, that's when resentment begins. And that right there is something you want to pay attention to early. And this is how long marriages are built.